Hello, leaders. Welcome back. This is Ledge. Today, I am excited to welcome Usman Sheikh to the show. Usman, I would love if you would give an introduction of yourself and your work. You are working on pretty much all the things that everyone is thinking about right now in the changing business landscape. So I don't know if you did that on purpose, but it sure was good timing.
Indeed. Hey, good morning and nice to meet you, David. My name is Usman Sheikh, as David just introduced me. I'm the CEO of a company based out of Silicon Valley called XIQ. XIQ stands for Multiply Your Intelligence, and our focus is on delivering AI-based solutions for B2B sellers and marketers. And what we've developed is a one platform hosted in the cloud that completes the full end-to-end sales and marketing cycle. Couple of unique things, what David was referring to in terms of what makes us current. We use generative AI quite a lot in our platform. And one of the outputs of that generative AI is that we have tapped into behavioral science, specifically psychometrics, and we're able to predict the personality and the behavior and motivations, communication style or prospective bias, and we use this information to help marketers and sellers custom tailor their sales pitch and their outreach. So that's a little bit about what I do currently in my role at XIQ.
Yeah, and you started it back in, if I think correctly, 2014. That was prior to, quite a bit prior to everyone now talking about, AI. So a lot of my guests recently, I've had the same similar type of question. What's it like when the rest of the world, catches up and starts talking about the same things as you 9 years later?
Yeah, actually that is correct. I remember you take me back to 2014. It was a garage at that time. I was sitting and had about three or four guys that we were kind of tinkering around. We were highly motivated by some of the new design capabilities. If you recall back then, there was a solution on iPad called the Flipboard. And Flipboard was this really
Yeah.
nice way of aggregating news. And that was kind of my initial inspiration in terms of, being able to present business data and information in a consumer friendly manner. If you've dealt with B2B solutions, they're very boring. I hate to kind of classify this, but we used to use the term, they're like Russian television screens, right? They're kind of very very monolithic, and um, they don't move. So we wanted to add color, we wanted to add excitement, we wanted to bring um, the emotion of the news and emotion of business back into front plate. And so I had been with SAP prior to that and had seen some of the best sales guys at work, and they uniquely understood their prospects and the people they were selling to. They understood their industry, and they were able to connect all those dots. And so that was a great motivation. But it was the top sellers were only about 5% or less of the organization, of the sales organization. So I went about back in 2014, kind of studying what were some of the factors that made these guys top performers, and understanding the human psyche and the behavior of who they were selling to, and kind of being able to mold themselves into how to communicate to individuals at the other end was a huge strength of these individuals. So fast forward to now, in the process we discovered AI, we discovered behavioral science. um, we were aggregating news from all over the internet. We were parsing it to bring up all the special news around companies and individuals. Um, and last November, as you say, the fuse was lit with Chat GPT, right? And everything just everything that we've been working on, and people had doubts like, AI, is this going to take my job? Is this a threat? Is this an opportunity? All of that started getting validated. So it feels really, really good now. Fast forward to 2023, and generative AI is the buzzword. It's being discussed at the board levels of every reputable organization that's thinking about growth. He's thinking about generative AI and how to use and tap into that power and capabilities that it brings along. And to be at the forefront of having brought this is extremely satisfying, and it validates what we've been thinking. It's very gratifying.
Do so much of being a founder and startups is, just the vision and understanding and wanting to do something different. And none of us can escape timing, and I just wonder, like, how do you think about that? Like, it's validating. Now, was it everything you wanted it to be until everybody started also having, those conversations? Like, what was that like, developing and almost educating people on a thing that maybe they didn't want to do as much as they want to do
Yeah.
now?
So, an interesting part of my background is that my education and my first 10 years of my career are in architecture. So, I'm an architect. So, what
Mhm.
that means is that I take visions, or I actually help create visions, and then eventually it results in a building or some kind of physical product. And there's a journey, and it's usually in architecture that's a fairly long journey, because you don't see things start to materialize the moment you think about them, but it takes a little while. So my behavioral attitude, my mindset, my way of thinking, my way of looking was pretty programmed into, there's a vision and we got to get to the vision. So it's a matter of having some patience. And along the way, you have to take your client on that journey to kind of help them understand, educate, see what world would look like over the horizon, so to speak, right? And so it was, for me, I was trained to do that. And that was very helpful when it came into actually producing. I didn't really know what form AI would take. I knew that we would be using AI. I knew we would be using this consumer grade user experience that everybody is used to and was going to become much more prevalent. I knew that we were going to be on mobile devices. I knew that. But then bringing it all, and I knew, generally speaking, what we wanted to do. A lot of whiteboarding sessions. And in those whiteboarding sessions, I remember talking to a colleague, and he said, this is great, Usman. You want to bring news, you want to bring finances, you want to bring um, social media settings, and media posts, all of that together. But you're forgetting one thing. There's a human at the end of the day that's right at the center of this. And that kind of just lit up that was kind of the aha moment, so to speak, the eureka moment. And like, where do we go to find and kind of crack that behavioral, the human psyche, right? How do we kind of help humans connect and communicate better with each other? So, yeah.
Yeah, you talked about it in your marketing materials that, like, there was a lot of talk even back then at the beginning about, sort of, people are still doing this. Like, oh, we aggregate intent data. We pull together all the news, we pulled all the finance, and like you just described that foundation. And I think what's interesting is then that, like, the personalization, and you started to see things come in around social selling and ABM, which you also represented. I saw in your infographic. And then it's like, hey, wait a second, psychology, individual, those buying motivations that are really at the one to one. And I could resonate to that as a B2B sales person. I need to know what motivates the one to one person that I'm talking to. Like, who really is this? And you often do wish you could run some kind of personality or motivation assessment, on them. So I think the value prop resonates with me very much. I have been successful in B2B sales, and I know that innately those of us, that have been able to do that and sort of assess the personality in real time works. And so you're able to now use technology to drive it to kind of the rest of everybody else who needs to be successful in that space.
Absolutely correct. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't sell to monolithic buildings. We sell to individuals.
Yeah.
And they're people just like you and me, and they have emotions, they have feelings, and they have risk factors that come into account when they're taking big decisions. And so how do you overcome that? And anybody can do that if they had the time to do it and they invested time and attention, underscore the word attention, into looking up the details to find out about those individuals. But let's face it, we've kind of muddled up the B2B sales landscape. Today, an average B2B seller spends less than 28% of their time on sales related activities. They're either in training, they're either updating their pipeline, they're either learning new products, they're trying to navigate this hybrid um, landscape that has been created for them. Um, they're collecting data, they're trying to analyze data. They're spending a lot of time doing things that are not really related to selling, which is their profession. And so, if you kind of break down sales, it goes back to the very basic. It's about people communicating with people, trying to convince them, trying to influence them, trying to show them the path. So, that's where we kind of redrew the line, right? What do we need to do? What is the epicenter of what XIQ does is to help people communicate better. And we equip them with data points and with information that lets them be convincing in the arguments that they're presenting, whether that be a business case, whether that be an email that we are going to be writing, whether that's just the talking script that we need to have when we're communicating with something. And another thing that's happened is the number of decision makers has grown exponentially as well. I remember, and maybe you remember as well, when we started, it was like 3 to 4 people that were involved in a decision making cycle. Today, there's 12 to 16 people on average that are involved. And you think about it, right? There's the end users that you need to convince that, hey, this is my product, this can help generate value. Then you need to convince their management in terms of what is the business case, what is the quantifiable impact that would have. Then you need to convince a person that's going to be the point of contact who's going to operate that system for you on your behalf. And you need to convince them this is not a net new headache, but this is going to actually add some benefit to their game as well. And then that's just on the end user side, the front end side of things. And then you have the chief financial officer and his team. Hey, give me the business case. What is the justification? Then you have the legal team. Are we doing the right thing? Is data privacy and personal identity being is secure? Then you have the IT department. Then you have the procurement department. You start adding all these people and you have to convince all these. That equation of having to just sell to one person, which is what happens in B2C, suddenly becomes very, very complex. And but at the same time, it's about people. And so cracking that code about, and not all people are the same. We have different, ways of um, understanding and different ways of communicating. So the 28% of the time that sellers are using to sell has now become even more fragmented because we are using that time to convince 16 people. And if we really have to spend attention to detail and invest time, we need to now learn about 16 or 20 people before we can get it right. And quite frankly, who has the time, right? So this is why was a
Right.
huge motivation for us to go back to the people equation, kind of understand how people behave and help those sellers do what they're good at doing, selling, by helping them understand how to communicate and get across to individuals.
Right. Right. Well, if you crack, the personality profile of someone who chooses to work in procurement, I think that by itself is a gold mine. But that's a different topic. So yeah.
That's a story for that's a different podcast altogether.
Like, we're gonna have to write a
Yeah, there
book
you go.
about that one. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And you know what's interesting is that you were able to really bring a lot of ethereal concepts to work into a product, which I think, and you go back to that history you talked about of all the pieces that would be necessary to go between the vision of a building that you would design to finally there's actually a physical building, standing there and it looks like the picture. That does strike me as like you seem to like to choose very complicated, multidimensional problems, in your life because that is not a short path. And you talked about merging at least four different disciplines there, kind of into product. And I'm interested how you you must have had to assemble experts in many different fields to do that, from an integrative standpoint. So, it's not easy to, for example, think about neuroscience and, personality assessments and motivations. And those are very human things. And relative to the idea of, well, we need integrative data management, in AI and big data and machine learning, whatever it was at the time, we keep changing the name. So, how have you done that as a leader in a human integrator? Because that's talk about different personalities, right? Like a neuroscientist and an AI scientist, data scientist. These are not similar
Yeah,
humans.
they're not. And it is kind of a challenging thing to take place. But it's also been a journey. And again, as an architect, one of the key things that I'm trained in is empathy, right? So that's one of the key things that you are kind of taught. And I say that as it's not a natural skill necessary. It's something that you can learn. So, and it's a journey. So, as one of the key things that we do is we listen a lot. We listen to what our clients are saying. And so, as the journey progressed, our vision initially was the user experience, being able to consolidate information into one location, and then present it 24/7 on your mobile device. That's where we started from. And then the people part started coming together and we started saying, okay, now let's go and study psychology. And a lot of this is, by the way, a lot of it is self-learning in that process as well. So I wouldn't say I'm a PhD in any of these, but I'm definitely knowledgeable about a lot of different topics because you're forced to do the research that's necessary. I'm also the chief product officer of XIQ. And so to start conceiving this product, and then start adding the neuroscience and the behavioral science aspects to this required us doing a lot of research in topics and subjects that we had no idea about, right? And then bringing in domain experts and then being able to communicate with them and then having them communicate with other people within the organization, which is what I guess you're referring to, like how do those guys talk? And it takes time. It's not frictionless, let's put it this way. So
Right.
saying the least.
Although
Yeah.
I guess you could say that about any organization. I've never been in a frictionless
Right.
one. It takes a lot of development to have that happen from an organizational perspective. And they're often looking to you as the leader to kind of break those log jams or, come up with constructive ways to collaborate. And ultimately somebody needs to make the decision, given all the information, some of which is contrary to the other. You're the boss, right? And you need to make that call and you need to make it in a way that has that empathy for all the ideas and saying, we are going to go with this one, not the other one, and yet still give honor to that. Does that align well with your leadership philosophy? I did also see that you're a driver. I believe it's on your LinkedIn profiles.
No, that's for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, it is. I am. So my personality, the disc chart, that I am in, I fall into the dominant as well as the conscientious. So I like to say, my crew says I have split personality, but I like to say that I'm the worst boss that you could have because on the one hand, I'm very detail oriented, I'm very conscientious. On the other hand, I want to make sure it gets done as well. I'm the driver guy. But it's a little bit, I think what motivates people is knowing where they can go with it, right? So the vision, like this has never been done before. We're boldly going where no man has gone before. I think at the end of the day, if you really have, my core thing is I want to be surrounding myself with innovators, with people who are forward thinking. And an innovator's biggest light bulb that goes on an innovator is to be able to innovate and go where nobody has gone before, to do something that's unique. And so when you can show them that, look, this is the kind of current stale state of sales, right? That's kind of like a tongue twister. Current stale state of sales. Um, and that you can break away from that by using these modern techniques and tools that have existed. Behavioral science and this disc methodology is almost 100 years old. It was not invented by us. We figured out how we can get you to predict the disk insights by using algorithms and so on. But it has existed, but and it has been, the testing part where people come in and they take a test and, you know, 1 week later you get the results. Well, we needed to change that. We can't do that in sales. I want to be able to press a button and I want to know that this person is a driver, and therefore this is how I should speak with them and this is how I should engage with them. And so we were able to, kind of build the platform that would help us do that. But then when you show like this is the art of the possible and this is what happens. And one of the things that we do, David, is we bring our developers and our product team to our sales calls very often. And we go in front of people who have never seen XIQ and we show them XIQ. And it's the aha, the wow factor, the light bulbs going on, which is the biggest quote unquote driver for my team to kind of follow the vision that we are creating. Like, see how these people are reacting. These people are experts at selling. They've been selling for a long period of time. They've seen it all. They've used all the tools. And look how they're responding to our vision, our product, something that we are developing. And that starts to build the consensus amongst the team members that yes, we're in the right direction, following the right vision. And that's super, super important to bring those guys. If people don't believe, they will never be able to build what you want them to build. So you've got to have one very, very important rule in the company. You've got to be a believer. You've got to believe in.
Yeah. That's an interesting cultural thing because I can imagine, at some companies, if you tell an engineer to go on a sales call, they're just going to be like, oh my gosh, like that's horrible. But you can build that eagerness because of that, sort of believer mindset. I have to imagine that you set that down early based on your own value set.
Yeah. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, that engineer needs to know what am I doing? What am I digging this hole for? Or what am I building this wall for? Right? I need to, what am I coding for? What is the output? Is it really going to, the moment they see the excitement, they see the opportunity that it's creating, the net new opportunities that this is creating, it's a different ball game. They come to work super charged up. They have ideas to throw out. um, they start questioning you. And in that discussion, in that debate, lies the core, spark of innovation. A- So it's very important. And we want, because we're doing something so new in a lot of ways, that we want that customer validation. We want that client input as well. And it happens, and we want to cut the distance between what the client is saying and what the developer and the product manager is actually taking in. We want to cut that distance. We want to be as one and one as possible. And I am sort of the shepherd or the champion or the chaperone for that particular. That's my goal number one, right?
Yeah. And your own background then, coming from, architecture and product and, okay, I'm going to be a founder. You wanted to solve a problem in sales because you recognized, an opportunity there. How have you evolved then into selling? You must do the practice of that thing to be so passionate about it, but it really wasn't. You wouldn't start your career as a salesperson in B2B. So like how did that all, come together? Like you're the CEO, you must still be involved in some way or another, at least in the biggest
Oh, I'm
deal.
involved in just about every deal. It's kind of scary that how many places I show up, and when I sleep or don't sleep. But yeah, again, it's this product. We created it for a purpose. Everybody within the company has to use the product. We don't use. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's the perfect thing to dog food.
We call it
That's for sure.
champagne, but yeah, exactly. We drink our own champagne, but yes, exactly correct. We've got to do that. So again, because that's part of the believer mindset. If you don't know how your product works, what it does, you will never be able to sell it. Our marketers go through sales. If you haven't been able to sell XIQ, you cannot market XIQ. So Sales is a very important
Listen,
part of what we do. It has definitely improved my sales game a lot. Um, we built it for, I mean, the core motivation was take the wisdom of the top 5% of the sellers and be able to distill it so that the next 95% can benefit. It's kind of the democratization of that wisdom, opening it up, kind of the Robin Hood story, if you may. And that really does charge me up at a personal level as well, right? So, again, if I'm going to create something for somebody, I need to taste it. I need to experience it. I need to know what it can do. And so I must say that my own sales game has benefited a lot from the product we've created. And I learn a lot constantly every day. But, again, it's knowing that it's about people and you cannot be afraid of people. You've got to engage with people, and people come in all sizes, forms, colors, languages today without any instructions, right? So, or till recently without any instructions. And so being able to
right.
uncover how you can engage is highly motivational. And that's really, the desire to talk to people, the desire to engage people, the desire to work with people is really I would say, a summary of my sales game.
How have things evolved through, I startups, and I think you're humble enough that you'll probably tell the real story. I gather already from talking to you that, like there are times that things don't go well on that visionary path. There are mistakes, there are learning opportunities. And what was that like in the 9 years? Can you look at spots where you go, wow, we got that wrong? And then what was the learning from that?
Yeah. So I think selecting the right kind of investor in your company is a very important aspect, right? Having some alignment on the vision. Um, People, when they put money into your company, they expect things to go the way they want things to go. And if you're a strong visionary and you want, we could have just stopped at being able to predict the personality type, the one point solution that we would have built, and forgone the platform that allows us to generate content, to help us write emails. Today, we have this personalized AI assistant called Gilroy that helps us, comes into all facets. We would have never done that. So some of the mistakes were that, we were kind of desperate for money and we took whatever came our way without really thinking through it. And having to pull out of situations such as that is quite ugly. It's very unfortunate and it's very painful. Um, and so I think, being able to have the guts, I would say, and the resilience up front to decide who is the right investor, and maybe even having the luxury to do that, right, is super, super important. Um, and those were some mistakes we made. Uh, Other than that, we've been very focused on customers. I still am very, very adamant about trying to give good customer success, building a customer success team. That continues to be a little bit of an unknown for us. We're still trying to find the right mix over there in the team to help us do that. Um, but yeah, I would say that the big thing was around finding the right investors, and when you do get the right investors, it's also pretty joyful because they're on board with your vision and they want to go where you're going and they help you get there. So it's a combination of both.
Yeah, absolutely. Financing is not a small feat. Obviously, the cheapest financing you can ever get is revenue. So I think that anybody who ever thinks about effectively bootstrapping and actually getting customers to pay you, that's the best money you can ever get. I'm a big fan of that, but some things just don't scale fast enough with just
Yeah.
revenue.
And, when you bring that revenue in for a product you've pretty much thought through and it's just been in your mind and now suddenly people are paying for it, that's really, really rewarding. Nothing like that. That's a big high.
Yeah. Yeah. Newer venture I'm working on now. We finally charged somebody a couple grand for something and that money showed up in the bank and you gotta go. Like that's where $1 million starts. That's where $10 million starts. It's just like when you walk into a bar and there's a bunch of dollar bills taped to the wall. Like that's important. I encourage people to think about that moment where we charged somebody and it actually landed in the
Yeah,
bank
there you go.
because it feels good every time. The first time, the zero to something. So take me back to okay, we see the three or four guys in the garage, and it's like I love those moments, particularly. I've been through this, walked out of a job in some way or another, like I sort of SAP, right? Bunch of years at SAP, and I'm gonna go start a thing, and probably leaving a pretty good situation, and then you're in a garage with a few other people, and stuff needs to happen. What was that like?
So for me, personally speaking, you know, the big enterprise play was a learning experience. So like going to university. It was learning how to speak to people. I will credit, a lot of what XIQ is today from my learnings, having worked in the premier B2B sales, B2B software company, SAP. I was also very fortunate with SAP to be able to travel the world, pretty much all four, five continents, and work. Literally, be able to plug into an office and work in a different, ethnicity, different language, different culture, different way of, working. So I learned a lot, and I was also privileged that across all these different geographies and the world, I was very privileged to work with some of the best salespeople. So that's where my knowledge base in terms of what were some of the best practices came about. Um, Moving to the garage was, now let's bringing it all together. The good side of working in a big enterprise was all what I've just stated. The bad side was it can be also very political. And when you have success, when you achieve success, that success in a big company has many fathers, right? So everybody claims that, hey, we were part of this journey and they were never there. And so it was time for me at a particular point in my life that I wanted to go out there and prove myself that, I could do it on my own. So that was pretty unwavering determination to be and resilience in being able to go to do that. And and sitting down with those four guys initially in the garage was extremely rewarding for me. I was highly motivated. I've always worked quite a lot. I've spent excessive amount of hours than I should be working. And but this time it was all money in the bucket for myself, right? So it was doing something that was going to eventually pay off. So um, and the big company experience had given me a lot of confidence in terms of what my decision making was. Was it the right one? Was it the wrong one? And now to come and do it for yourself was a lot of fun for me. And it continues to be because every day we hear something, that, hey, I did not know your product could do this. Or, customers coming in saying, every time we listen to you guys or every time we use the product, we discover something new. That, is just payback for all those dreadful hours that we may have spent in the cold. The garage was cold also, by the way. We needed space heat.
I've done the cold garage thing. You're absolutely right. Once in a while, single pane windows.
Exactly.
Yeah,
There you go. You know it.
I've done the garage thing. Yeah, and I always like to go back to that, those early moments and kind of think about like what actual level of research and preparation and the sort of the amount of time to develop even before that, took place. Cause when I evaluate, the first time, I guess for me, it's back around 2006, seven, I'm going to leave a job and I'm going to go make a startup. And when I really think about it, my journey to that point started at lunch hours, you know, years before that, where I was kind of like, I have this itch. Like, I think I want to solve these problems, and doing the work, doing the thinking about, how might we actually execute this. in retrospect, I didn't know what I was talking about. And, it was, now I look back, I wouldn't have bought that, but but the benefits of having no hair and growing up, I guess. And yeah. So how much of that early stage was there, before garage days and then, after garage days before it became an actual thing?
No, that's a great point. So I would say almost 14 months to a year and a half before I left my company, I started thinking the idea was there for quite some. I knew I wanted to do something. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Then, it started coming together. I was, asked to build a digital marketplace demand generation hub for SAP. And again, I was very fortunate that the leaders in my company gave me the opportunity to do so, and they gave me a pretty, you know, open hand to kind of go out and discover things. And this is back in 2008, I would say, 2008. Yeah, we started doing, looking at how we could tap into social media, how we could bring video to online experiences, so people could, test out, quote unquote, test out enterprise class solutions. What the value of testimonials was, how developer networks and those notes and those communications going by between developers could really add to, to help buyers make decisions. Also understanding way back then that buyers were even back then starting to spend more time away from sellers doing their own independent research. And so how could we channel that? And one very important thing that came into, that kind of starting to become obvious was that you had to gain mind share before the decision making or the decision to acquire something started. And that's a very important thing that most people in B2B sales don't realize today, that, where is the idea being born? You've got to be there today. You cannot be at the point where the idea is coming to fruition, like, hey, I want to buy XYZ. That's too late in the equation. You got to be like, let me
Yeah.
help you formulate the idea. So about 14 months, 15 months when I was building this, it started coming together. But again, I was in the confines of a big company, working to their rules, their requirements, their brand guidelines, all the stuff that you have to work, their politics, their organizational structures. So I was able to get away with doing a lot of things, but there was a lot of pent up desire, and the vision started formulating. Hey, we could do this. What if this happened, right? And so then, from what we did with this digital marketplace, came the idea of, well, how about if we were to assemble these pieces together? What would that be able to do? And that started about 14 months ago. I started dipping my toe. I started doing a lot of online research, like how would we is it even legal to aggregate this kind of data? How would we aggregate it? Where would we get it? You know, what is, giving, attributions all about? So there's a lot of work that happened while I was in my previous job, but it was all kind of, I think, eventually culminating in me stepping out and doing my thing.
That's that's fascinating, that process you just described, right? I mean, you just talking about probably some of the first research into demand gen, and that's a thing now. And everybody like, oh yeah, only 3% of the buyers ever want to buy something right now. What are we doing with the 97% for a year and a half prior to them even thinking about it? Like, I mean, that's the gospel of demand gen now. And you're talking about way back when, having just the initial research to do that. That's
And
fascinating.
David, how many companies still don't do that? They might talk the game,
I,
but I would venture to say that a vast majority of companies do not
you're right.
invest in building their brand reputation. And when I say their brand reputation, it's not just the company's brand reputation, it's the individual, the seller's brand reputation. I have to have a reputation which says this guy knows something about AI and sales and marketing and B2B and account based selling and marketing. I've got to have people need to be able to come to me to say, okay, we trust you. We recognize that you've invested time, you paid your dues in this space. Yeah, that's
Use.
very, very important. People, shortcuts don't work. And, and you've got to be really able to come in and paid your dues. So, investing and companies that do invest in that are the ones that have longevity, are the ones that succeed, are always ahead of the curve as well.
Well, there are a lot of demand gen consultants making a lot of money, proving your point that people still don't do this 10 years later. So you are definitely ahead of the
Yeah.
curve on that.
Yeah.
Well, before we run out of time, I just want to know from you, I like to ask all my guests is your unique perspective as a leader in B2B with your experience and all the things you've gone through and what you see in the marketplace now. Look forward a couple years and what must be on the radar for everybody who's listening, regardless of their role.
Yeah. So I will say something that is fairly current, but I think it's very important because AI is something that's getting popular, but there's a lot of trepidation. There's a lot of hesitation towards it as well. And there's another thing that's happening with AI is a lot of people are using this new technology to do things and conduct processes that were old process. And what we need to start thinking about is that AI is a dimensional change. It's a new caliber of measurement. And therefore, we need to reinvent the process. Now, the art of selling will always be the same. It's going to be the people to people interaction, but it's going to be degrees of personalization. It's going to be the agility with which we respond. It's going to be the visibility into our prospects and into our target audiences. It's the definition of that ideal customer profile that will continuously improve. And AI help us a lot. So I would say that, future thinking, AI should be definitely a tool set. And I really classify this as a tool set. I don't classify it as anything more than that, right? It has to fit the imagination and the vision has to be created at the human level. Now, let me give you a quick little example. I'm sorry if I take a little bit longer, but my product developments, my product innovation life cycle, just to write a used to be, let's say, 6 to 8 months for a particular thing that we were going to introduce. Today, with generative AI, I have really done it in an hour and a half, believe it or not. Okay. Maybe by the time we cleaned it up, it was 2 days, but it's gone from that 6 to 8 week cycle to an hour and a half. Mm. And so the timeline and the agility with which what we can do now, if I can do things where I can introduce new products which are defined, and I will say this also much better defined, much better qualified than what it would have taken a human to do in 8 weeks. If I can do that, my rate of innovation accelerates a lot, right? When my rate of acceleration it's just a new dimension that I bring to the market. Today, our customers are not and should not be evaluating on what we have in the bucket today, but should be looking at the velocity with which we can introduce innovation to the market. I think that's a big evaluation criteria that companies need to think about. Like they think about, oh, are they sustainable? Are they large? Today, small companies like ours can behave bigger and better than large companies because we have the tools to do that. And that's really how these AI based tools should be utilized, is to help us leapfrog, is to help us look much more abundant than we are in reality. And there's no reason why we should fall short of that. So, the decision that there's the famous saying, nobody ever got fired for selecting IBM, or put a question mark at the end of. No disrespect to IBM at all, by the way,
Not in the 80s, they didn't.
right? Yeah. So I think that, moving forward, we need to be looking at AI as a big game changer, something that should be in the tool set. those people that use AI will advance. Those people that don't, unfortunately, become obsolete.
Yeah. You're the first guest that has said that, thinking about it from, hey, it's sort of like, it's like people using these tools that go, oh, well, cool. I can write more emails or I can write more content and it does a lot of things for me. But I completely agree with you. It's like abstract that and kind of get to the meta work. And I would encourage people, and I have done this myself, anything you think I need to analyze or I need to assimilate or I need to come up with an integrative thinking result, this thing can do it a million times faster than you or anybody with a job called analyst. And I would encourage everybody to think of it that way because just, and we saw this with process automation, even in the 90s, right? Like we could essentially, we can make the dumb thing that we were doing before much faster. But what can we train? We now have a tool that can teach us to do things better, not just faster because we were stuck that way before. And I think that lesson alone is worth the listen. I hope everybody stuck around to the end. Uthman, this was brilliant. Thank you so much for the insights. Really great conversation. You're obviously a tremendous leader for yourself and your companies, and I love the empathy. And I just really look forward to seeing all the next innovative things you come up with. Anybody that's resonating and wants to check you out online or reach out to you, what's the best
So
channels to do?
LinkedIn, I'm always on LinkedIn, quite active on LinkedIn. So that's USMAN, Usman Sheikh, SHEIKH. You can look me up. xiqinc.com is our website. And recently also on Instagram, TikTok, all this X, all the social media. But LinkedIn would be probably the best way to get through to me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming out and sharing. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, David. Appreciate it. Really enjoyed the conversation as well.